Alright, so everyone probably already knows what an iceberg is. I'm gonna try to get straight into this video. This is the Souls franchise Iceberg, created by a redditor named RobDD123. All credit goes to him for creating this chart, and I'll link it in the description. Here's a picture of their comment section to prove they allow use of their iceberg. Before we start, I'd like to mention my personal thoughts on DS2, since a lot of fans of the franchise do not like DS2. I believe that points from DS2 may be canon, however the overall story itself may be a bit more lenient, therefore I'll be using lore from DS2 as evidence in certain points of the video. This, however, should not be a problem, as very few entries use DS2 as evidence. Demon Souls, however, only has one entry, which I know nothing about. Now let's get into it. The Nameless King is a boss in Dark Souls 3, located in the Archdragon Peak. He's very commonly referred to as a son of Gwyn. However, the Iceberg states that he's Gwyn's firstborn. How can we prove this? Back before the war with the dragons, lore is very foggy and is hard to pinpoint. Let's try to find a starting point. A distant land, far from Drangleic, named Ferosa, is host to the Ferocian Knight, the main staple of Dark Souls 2. These knights are known to worship none other than the god of war, Faram. I bring this up because in the item description of the Soul of the Nameless King, quote, "The Nameless King was once a dragon-slaying god of war, before he sacrificed everything to ally himself with the ancient dragons," end quote. Here, these two bits of lore intersect to show the Nameless King as possibly named Faram, and may be worshipped outside of both Lordran and Lothric. But this still does not prove he is the son of Gwyn nor the firstborn child. The Storm-Curved Sword states, quote, "The Nameless King, ally of the ancient dragons, fought beside the Stormdrake in countless battles. When the great beast fell, the king claimed his soul, as was the custom in the Age of Gods." End quote. The Age of Gods is referred to as the time after the war with the dragons was concluded, showing that the Nameless King was indeed around after the war with the dragons, and we know that he betrayed his own kind to ally with the dragons. How do we know he is the firstborn? Our last piece of evidence is the Dragon Slayer's sword spear. Quote, "Its owner was the Nameless King, a deific hunter of dragons. The sword spear is imbued with lightning, of which he was the heir." End quote. He was around to hunt dragons, and he is stated as the heir, presumably lightning, or rather maybe sunlight, as it's commonly thought that he is the statue depicted in Dark Souls 1 of the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant. Being the firstborn, he was around to fight alongside Gwyn and Dragon Slayer Ornstein in the fight against the dragons. Far in the future, an unknown incident caused him to side with the dragons and be revoked of his god status and be banished from the land, causing him to reside where he is found in Dark Souls 3. Now I believe this entry is referring to the trophy in Sekiro, named Dragon's Homecoming, which is tied to one of the endings of Sekiro, the return ending. I'm not going to explain how to get to this ending, as it's the most convoluted ending, but the overall point is to help the divine dragon return to its place of origin. This refers to the 3 umbilical cords needed to fight the moon presence at the end of Bloodborne's story. Only 3 are needed to be crushed in order to encounter the moon presence. However, there are actually 4 umbilical cords, despite being named 1/3 of umbilical cord. 1 is obtained in the old workshop. 1 is obtained from Ariana's baby. 1 is obtained after beating Mergo's wet nurse, and the 4th is obtained from the imposter Yosefka after Rom's boss fight. Each cord shares the same description except for Yosefka's. Quote, "Every great one loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate." End quote. This is possibly one of the reasons as to why the moon presence appears, as it is known as a Great One, and the same Great One that bound Gehrman to the Hunter's Dream, the previous boss fight, though it's most likely we were thwarting its nefarious plans to slay the other Great Ones. This one is pretty straightforward, as the painted world of Ariamis in Dark Souls 1 is turned into the painted world of Leyndell in Dark Souls 3. As to how Lordran turns into Lothric, we can already see the effects time has in Dark Souls 1 in the painted world as it begins to rot, the same as Dark Souls 3, the residence in Leyndell and the underneath of the chapel. After the player kills crossbreed Priscilla, a new some kind of ruler or owner of the painting is to be decided. So the answer could be very simple, as Sister Fried or Father Leyndell may have taken over after some time, only to then be passed to the Painter Girl. There's also the Snow and Ice fact. The whole point of the painted world is to be reborn or painted, so this theory is pretty much true. Time is convoluted. I'm not going to dig super hard into this one. I just don't know if I can bring myself to get into it. But this is for sure the case. A few examples could be the memories of giants in Dark Souls 2, the images of players around the world and their unforeseen messages and deaths, the painted worlds, as stated before, and even Solaire just outright says it.
We are amidst strange beings in a strange land. The flow of time itself is convoluted, with heroes centuries old phasing in and out. The very fabric wavers, and relations shift and obscure. There's no telling how much longer your world and mine will remain in contact.
Abandoned Workshop. I like this one a lot. So this is simply referring to the location that Gehrman's dream is based off of. This is the original workshop he resided in during the hunt, creating his various tools and weapons with his doll companion, or rather likely to be the real Maria. The doll's armor can be found in the chest along with an umbilical cord. Items not related, as the umbilical cord was likely taken from the slaughter of the fishing hamlet and the Orphan of Kos. But the reason as to why the workshop is abandoned is because when the healing church began to rise to power, there was simply no need anymore, and it resided below the cathedral ward, never to be seen again. Gwyndolin is male. Gwyndolin was indeed born a male, however he has the affinity for moon magic due to the time of his birth, so he was raised as female. You know what, rather than explaining it, Dark Souls 3 Reversal Ring, quote, a divine ring granted to the Dark Moon Gwyndolin in his youth, causes males to perform female actions and vice versa. Gwyndolin was raised like a daughter to the aura of the moon and was said to behave like a sullen, brooding goddess. End quote. Marika is Radagon. Our first Elden Ring theory, Marika is Radagon. Now I say theory, but this is pretty much proven. The player is to use Law of Regression and Incantation when nearby a statue of Radagon in the Leyndell royal capital. Regression alone reveals secrets. This will turn the statue into Queen Marika and pretty much prove this statement. This is also an important part in Corrin's questline. Soul of Cinder. Now all that's stated here is the Soul of Cinder, so I'll just explain what the Soul of Cinder is. It's exactly what it says. Every person who has ever linked themselves to the flame. This means the Soul of Cinder is both your player character in the first Dark Souls, as it is canon that the player gave themselves to the flame, as stated by the Undead Prophecy and Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. This is the reason as to why the Soul of Cinder can use any weapon, as well as both faith and intelligence at the same time. Everyone knows his second phase as the famous Pling Pling Plong of Gwyn's theme, and this is the reason as to why Gwyn takes over the vessel as the final fight once again. The last giant is the Giant Lord. The first boss in Dark Souls 2 is sometimes fought as the last giant. He's chained up and becomes extremely aggressive and almost enraged by the sight of you when you enter his room. He's been trapped there for who knows how long, and now he finally decides to break out. Even for his second phase, he rips off his own arm to attack you with it as a weapon. Well, it turns out, you're venturing into the past memories of giants from Vendrick's War. You can fight the Giant Lord, which shares a striking resemblance to the last giant. This would explain his anger and frustration upon seeing you, as you were the reason his species was wiped out, leading to him being the last giant. Original Firelink in Dark Souls 3. Now this one I'm not entirely sure on, so my hypothesis would be that its location is somewhere within the Ring City. Over the countless years the fire has been linked, ash covers the land and everything comes together and converges, leaving the fire's possible location in Dreg Heap. I'm not entirely sure if geographically this is where the fire would be located, but given the time skipped, I would bet the fire is no longer intact in the lands of Lothric. There's also the chance that it could be located in the boss room of the Demon Princes, as I've heard you can find Kingseeker Framp's hole located here, though I am unsure of this fact. Frampt, or rather Koth, will be discussed later in many entries, so get used to their names. Solaire links the fire. Lastly, for Tier 1, Solaire links the fire. I don't believe this means that Solaire actually linked the first flame, but rather he is alongside you when you link the first flame. If Solaire is saved throughout his questline, he can be summoned to help the player character take on Gwyn in jolly cooperation and put him out of his misery. This theory must state that he was the one to link the flame instead of you after this fight, which is most likely untrue. As to Solaire's true fate, we may never know. Ranni sets Elden Ring in motion. This is a big one. Ranni is possibly the character who sets things into motion within the world of Elden Ring, so let's try to simplify things into an easier to understand order. The story of Elden Ring takes place because the Elden Ring was shattered. So why was the Elden Ring shattered? This is because Godwyn the Golden was murdered during the Night of the Black Knives. But how do you kill an unkillable demigod? Godwyn was killed by Black Knife assassins using knives imbued with a fragment of the Rune of Death. But how did the Black Knives come to this conclusion, to use the Rune of Death? Well, Ranni was seeking an easy way to rid herself of being a pawn to the greater will, and sought after a way to shed her corporeal flesh and kill her own two fingers. Let's prove these two situations occurred during the same time. The curse mark of death upon Ranni's body at the top of the Divine Tower of Luernia states as so, quote, "Curse mark carved into the discarded flesh of Ranni the Witch, also known as the half-wheel wound of the centipede. This curse mark was carved at the moment of death of the first demigod, and should have taken the shape of a circle. However, two demigods perished at the same time, breaking the curse mark into two half-wheels. Ranni was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone." End quote. This proves that these two actions happened one and the same, but perhaps more evidence is needed. Well, Ranni just happens to say this.
"I see. Quite the sleuth, aren't we? Indeed, I am the witch, Ranni. I stole a fragment of the Rune of Death, and used it to forge the god-slaying black knives through fearsome rite. I did it all."
This, without a doubt, proves Ranni knew what she was doing, and purposely led to the events of the Night of the Black Knives to unfold, leading to the shattering. Sorig traveled to Elium Lois. Night Slayer Sorig, an NPC invader in Dark Souls 3, invades your world in the catacombs of Carthus. The ring he drops is named Night Slayer's Ring. Its effect is that enemies lose 20% more stamina when guarding attacks. This ring in Dark Souls 2, named Ivory Warrior Ring, has a very similar effect. Increases stamina damage dealt by attacking shields by 20%. So it's safe to say these two rings are one and the same. This pretty much proves that Night Slayer Sorg once traveled to the land of Elium Lois. The Night Slayer's Ring description states, quote, "Long ago, Sorg engaged the guardians of an ancient city in a bloody confrontation, and returned with their rings as his prize, still frozen on their dismembered fingers." End quote. This theory is almost certainly proven true. Dead Koi. This probably refers to the interaction the player can have with the giant carp at the Fountainhead Palace in Sekiro. If the player uses enough treasure carp skills at Pot Noble Arunaga's shop, they'll offer you the truly precious bait to feed the giant carp, which ends up killing it. The item description states, quote, "This is truly precious bait. If bait has hair, you know it's something truly special." The Fountainhead Palace noble, in the pot, is obsessed with becoming one with the master. Present this bait to the master, the great carp. Offer it earnestly, but quietly, so no one knows. End quote. The last line shows that the pot noble knew what was going to happen when the giant carp was fed this bait, and his motivation was probably in his belief that he could become one with his master, or maybe turn into the next giant carp, ultimately trying to take its place. It's been a while since I've played, but I've also heard that there are two pot traders, and doing this action causes the other pot trader to die, further proving this point. Dark Souls 1's Crow's Nest. This probably refers to the crow's nest at the top of Firelink Shrine. If the player reaches said nest and pretends to be an egg, the same crow that takes you from the Undead Asylum to Firelink Shrine will take you back to said asylum. This may also refer to Snuggly the Crow as well. This is a different nest entirely at the Undead Asylum that the player can drop items into and receive several kinds of trades. Time travel is a concept prevalent in almost every FromSoft game, so far, if not every. Here are some examples from each game. Dark Souls 1, Artorias of the Abyss DLC, is the player traveling back into time before the events in the main game. In this DLC, the player can do several things that set into motion certain events in the main game. The most notable is saving Sif, which then changes the initial cutscene when fighting him. More on this later. Dark Souls 2, there are several examples. The Things Betwixt is a place in between time, and the player travels back in time to fight the Giant Lord after killing the last giant, and a memory of the Old Iron Lord in the second DLC, Crown of the Old Iron King, allows you to go back into time to fight Sir Alone. Dark Souls 3, in the Ring City DLC, if the player touches Filianor's egg, time seems to jump thousands of years into the future, where almost everything is ash and nothing is left. In Sekiro, the wolf can travel back into time where he witnesses the owl's betrayal and onslaught on Harada Estate. In Bloodborne, in the Old Hunter DLC, the player character can play through Gehrman's Hunt and witness the events up to Lady Maria's astral clock tower and the slaughter of the fishing hamlet as well as the Orphan of Kos. And I've never played Demon Souls, but I have no doubt that there are hints of time travel. And lastly, in Elden Ring, the character travels back in time to the time before crumbling Farum Azula was, well, crumbling, to fight Dragon Lord Placidusax. These are only a few examples from each game, but there are definitely plenty more. Project Beast. This is probably the simplest entry on the list so far. Project Beast is what From Software referred to as Bloodborne during development. That's literally it for this one. Winter Lanterns. These are the enemies that everyone remembers in the Nightmare Frontier, as when they look at you, They cause frenzied buildup. They're also used as one of the only offline ways to farm powerful physical attack blood gems. I'm going to read all of the notes from the Winter Lantern's wiki page to give you some unsettling facts about them. Quote, their brain seems to be entwined with several messengers. Winter can be related to death or slumber, and considering the high threat that these enemies pose, could imply that their name refers to them as a death beacon of sorts. At a certain level of insight, they will begin singing in an off-key tone. They wear what appears to be a blood-stained version of the doll set, minus the shawl. Close examination of their hands revealed that they have the same hands as the doll, albeit slimy and covered in tentacles. Their bodies are a great deal taller than the doll, and there is no doll head underneath the brain. Their mouths look just like Venus flytraps. It has a large gash along the spine, for which there is yet no explanation. End quote. Angelic faith caused a civil war. This is the first entry that is entirely new to me. In the lands of Lothric in Dark Souls 3, the player character can come to the conclusion that the Blue Knights are at war with the Red Knights. But why is this the case? For this entry, I'm going to read directly from the Dark Souls wiki on a deceased character who can be found in the Grand Archives named Gertrude. Quote, Gertrude was the holy maiden of Guinevere, Queen of Lothric, and she was also said to be the Queen's child, giving her the title of Heavenly Daughter. She taught her healing miracles to her knights, and they became part of the miracles in use in Lothric, implying that she had a great influence on the knights of the kingdom. One day, Gertrude was visited by an angel, a lucent humanoid creature created by the evolution of humanity of the pilgrims of Londor, that were arriving to the kingdom of Lothric. The entity revealed to her a truth capable of manifesting pillars of light together with a belief completely opposed to those to the culture of Lothric. The Holy Maiden was convinced by this enlightenment and began to spread the worship of those she considered divine messengers. However, this faith was viewed as heresy in Lothric, as it opposed the worship of the ancient gods and the duty to continue linking the First Flame, and was consequently unrecognized by any of the three pillars that govern the realm. Due to the danger that her new faith posed to the kingdom, despite her position of closeness to the Queen, Gertrude was imprisoned in the sealing cell inside the Grand Archives. Here, she was subjected to the experiments of scholars, probably intrigued by the feathers she had manifested as a result of her faith. The scholars even used her sacred chime, using the power of crystals to make a catalyst that was suitable for casting both miracles and sorceries. Eventually, the abuses of the scholars led the woman to lose both her voice and her sight, but she remained determined to record what the angel told her, even if in the form of fragmentary scrawls. Even though Gertrude was still in captivity, her incomprehensible tale somehow reached the rest of Lothric, and became the foundation of an angelic faith that venerated angels despite the three pillars' condemnation of heresy. Over time, the heretical faith also spread among the Knights of Lothric, who despite maintaining the symbols and armor of the kingdom, swore themselves to the angels. These soldiers even went so far as to create iconography, an art of their new faith, depicting themselves as angelic executioners under a solar eclipse. And their strong faith led them to develop angelic wings similar to those of the objects of their worship, seen as heretics despite the fact that they still wore the insignia of Lothric. These knights, now called wing knights, armed themselves with weapons more befitting of executioners and came into conflict with the three pillars and Lothric's loyalist army. In the final days of the reign of Lothric and the First Flame, Gertrude died, still in her cage. However, the Wing Knights continued to patrol various locations within Lothric and even the castle, and Gertrude's most loyal knights are positioned to defend their saint's resting place. Some attempted to reach the chambers of Prince Lothric to either kill him or convince him of their beliefs, but they were all killed by his brother Lorien. End quote. This was all new information to me, so it's always interesting to learn something new about games you thought you knew everything about. Seek Pale Blood. When the player first starts the game of Bloodborne, they can read a note nearby that states, quote, "Seek the Pale Blood to transcend the hunt," end quote. It's possible the player may have come to Yusefka's clinic knowing exactly what the blood transfusion would lead to. After all, the point of the hunt is to not go out and kill a few beasts, but rather to transcend and become a great one. The pale blood may not refer to the blood at all, but rather refer to the moon cycle or the moon presence. This may then translate this saying to seek great ones, possibly to learn the truth. Fallen Knight Pants. This entry is referring to the Fallen Knight trousers item description in Dark Souls 3. The description is as stated, quote, trousers of an order of fallen knights, held beneath leather boots and drab cloth, using a knot of rope and bandage. They are dampened, indelibly stained with the misery of flight. End quote. It's heavily implied people who wore these pants beat themselves. Moonlight Greatsword. The Moonlight Greatsword is a sword that makes an appearance in each game besides Sekiro, and I'm ignoring Demon Souls due to my knowledge. It appears in Dark Souls as the Moonlight Greatsword. It appears in Dark Souls 3 as the Moonlight Greatsword. It appears in Bloodborne as the Holy Moonlight Sword and is wielded by Ludwig or Ludwig's Holy Blade. And last, it appears most interestingly in Dark Souls 2 as the Moonlight Greatsword. However, an NPC named Benhart of Jugo wields a replica named Blue Moon Greatsword. He is only able to barely continue his journey believing the sword holds great power. He is under the false impression it is the real thing. His dialogue is as so.
See, the old sword's caught your attention. Well, you've a good eye then. That has been in my family for generations. They say it is crafted with moonlight, and we all know what that means. It wards off evil. And I wouldn't trade her for all the riches in the world. It's said that no man has ever teased out the sword's true power. But in the right hands...
He is able to make it all the way to Drangleic with the player's help, showing how powerful a person's will and belief can really be. I just liked that story a lot and wanted more people to learn about it. Profaned Capitol cut content. The Profaned Capitol is hyped up to be one of the most important areas of Dark Souls 3, being home to Yorm the Giant, one of the lords in the initial cutscene. However, when the player reaches it, it only takes around 15 minutes to clear everything, and I mean everything too. It's likely that this area was the area to suffer to time crunch, and was rushed, leading to what we have now. New Londo bodies. New Londo was flooded once it was discovered the abyss resided within, and the bodies left over after the fact and subsequent draining of water are probably the inhabitants who once called New Londo home, left to rot underwater to save the greater good. The undead were rounded up in the undead asylum, so that only leaves uncursed humans left to reside, making the tale even more tragic. Shards of Manus. After the player character slays Manus, Father of the Abyss, in Dark Souls 1, his soul shatters into multiple pieces, creating the Daughters of the Abyss we see in Dark Souls 2. Those daughters being the main villain of the game, Nashandra, Queen to King Vendrick, Ilana, the Squalid Queen, Nadalia, Bride of Ash, and Alsana, Silent Oracle. After killing the Burnt Ivory King in the Crown of the Ivory King DLC, Alsana will say this:
"You've granted my one wish. Now, I have no regrets. I was born amidst the dark. Long ago, In the depths of the abyss, my father perished. The dark shattered into tiny pieces, one of which was me. How frightened I was. A frail thing, born from but a splinter of dark. I felt that I might simply disappear. I am, in fact, the incarnation of my father's fears. I saw that the king of this land was strong. I sought him only to sustain myself, to smother my fears. Now, I realize that he may have known all along. I was born of fear, and my lord provided comfort. And so, here I remain, heiress to my lord's wishes, watching over chaos. Until the end of time.
This gives a faint idea of how these sisters to one another came into being. Placidusax had 5 heads. Elden Ring has significance in the number 3, which we'll dive into later. However, Placidusax once had 5 heads. However, he lost 3 of them, leading to the 2 heads we see in his boss fight. In a long time past, Dragon Lord Placidusax once fought Queen Marika the Eternal, and these wounds could symbolize the 2 fingers, a scar to keep from days gone. He has 2 pig. I would assume this refers to the secret pig mini-boss in Majula after slaying the tiny pigs 12 times. Then 2 undead boars will spawn in their place. Once those boars are killed 12 more times, then a giant undead boar will spawn in its place. This giant undead boar will drop 3 cracked red eye orbs upon death. Another interesting fact is that during Alana's boss fight, she has the chance to spawn enslaved pigs to fight for her during her boss fight. This is unironically the best spawn you could get during her boss fight. And lastly, in Brightstone Cave Seldora, according to the wiki, there's a 1 in 100 chance of a friendly pig spawning. If led to some mushrooms in the lower Brightstone Cave, it will dig up a pickaxe for the player. The hostile pigs may also be able to dig up said pickaxe too. Dark Souls 2 really had some attention to detail that goes unnoticed by the wider public. Basilisk Tiny Eyes. I feel everybody knows this by now, but basilisks are very similar to moths as they have fake eyes made to look like their real eyes. Their actual eyes appear right over the top of their mouths. Hydra Jump. In Dark Souls 1, when the player visits Ash Lake, a Hydra will jump over your character from left to right. It looks a little goofy because it doesn't have an animation, but it is such an awesome encounter. An Orlando River. This is a confusing entry, but I'll do my best. I believe the creator intended to write New Londo River maybe instead, so I'm gonna run with this. The water that was used to flood the New Londo ruins had seeped down from the Darkroot Basin, possibly from the lake the Hydra resides in. This water would then be drained into the Valley of Drakes, which has a conveniently shaped river-like chasm for the water to drain into. I've also seen a Reddit post where a user believes that An Orlando are some ruins in the distance in Elden Ring's Siofra River, though I highly doubt the creator was referring to this, nor would this be the case anyways. Manus is the Furtive Pygmy. The Furtive Pygmy is a character only mentioned in the initial cutscene in Dark Souls 1. Gwyn later turned against the Furtive Pygmy and his fear of the Dark Soul. But who really is the Furtive Pygmy? Well, it's commonly thought that the Furtive Pygmy is actually Manus, Father of the Abyss. His soul description, Soul of Manus, states, quote, "Soul of Manus, Father of the Abyss. This extraordinary soul is a vicious, lukewarm lump of gentle humanity. Ancient Manus was clearly once human, but he became the Father of the Abyss after his humanity went wild, eternally seeking his precious broken pendant." End quote. He was once a human, as was the Furtive Pygmy, being humanoid in shape before the Lord Souls. Manus is referred to as a primeval human, which may refer to him being the Furtive Pygmy. But in my opinion, this is all purely speculation, as I've heard the theory that Ludwig from Dark Souls 3 may also be the Furtive Pygmy, as well as Slave Knight Gael. That's the real fun in Dark Souls lore. There are some things we may never know. Lost Sinner possessed by Izalith. Each of the 4 main bosses in Dark Souls 2 possesses the soul of a Great One, and it's pretty much stated that the Lost Sinner possesses the Witch of Izalith's soul. The item the Lost Sinner drops upon death is called the Old Witch Soul, which can then be traded for a Chaos Blade from Weaponsmith Ornifex. You can also see the bug in the initial cutscene with the Lost Sinner, and if you can remember from Dark Souls 1, bugs are pretty closely tied to the Chaos Flame, with the Centipede Demon being one of them. Fake Havel and plot to overthrow the gods. I've combined these 2 entries together as I believe they are highly linked together. There's an extremely popular video on YouTube named Ash Lake Havel and the Plot Against the Gods by Hawkshaw, and I highly recommend watching that video as it is specifically made on these 2 points alone. I'm going to focus mostly on the fake Havel aspect. Havel's ring description states, quote, "This ring was named after Havel the Rock, Lord Gwyn's old battlefield compatriot. Havel's men wore the ring to express faith in their leader and to carry a heavier load." End quote. This is the ring dropped from the fake Havel at the bottom of the Lock Tower in Undeadburg. The ring states that it's worn by its followers of Havel. I believe Havel was once locked down here. However, when walking up the stairs to the tower where the undead with the barrel trap resides, the player can fall off and survive on a cliff below that leads back to the area with the Black Knight. This shows that this area was possibly a man-made escape. Hawkshaw goes into much more detail in the operation of getting Havel out of the tower. But what about the plot against the gods? Havel possibly had many things in motion behind the scenes to assassinate certain people or gods. Hawkshaw's video is a great watch for this topic. That's all I'm going to get into on this, but if you want to learn more, I've left a link to his video in the description. Finger Whistle. The Finger Whistle is a shinobi tool in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Its description states, quote, "A prosthetic tool created by fitting a slender finger to the prosthetic, cause spirit emblems to use. Its sound will grab an enemy's attention and draw them to the whistle's location. By locking onto a target, only the targeted enemy will hear the whistle. The sound of the finger whistle enrages beasts, making them unable to distinguish friend from foe." End quote. There are a few upgrades to this whistle, and it can even be used on the Demon of Hatred to stun him 3 times. If there is more lore to this finger whistle, then I am unsure of what this is referring to. Koth is dead. This refers to the fact that Koth, who the player can encounter in Dark Souls 1 after defeating the 4 kings, is actually dead. Now in the far future in Dark Souls 3, after slaying Yuria of Londor, she will say,
I have failed thee.
However, in the Japanese version, this translates to Koth, your dying wish. Yuria may be hinting at the fact that since you killed her, the darkness ending she desires may not be going to plan. Since you, the player, killed Yuria, you may be on track to becoming the Lord of Hollows, rekindling the flame, whereas if Yuria were alive, she may be able to sway you into letting the flame die. After all, Koth's wish was that of darkness. As to if Koth is actually dead, it's likely he passed long before the game of Dark Souls 3 and even the lands of Lothric. Sif remembers you. I briefly touched on this earlier, but in Dark Souls 1 and the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, if you save Sif from the humanity spirits before fighting Sif in the main game, you'll see a special cutscene where Sif briefly recognizes you, but still has to fight you to protect his deceased master's grave and the Covenant of Artorias. Five-Finger Schism. This is a theory that the original emissary for the Greater Will used to be a whole hand instead of two fingers. A very simplified version is the belief that the Nox used the Finger Slayer blade to split the celestial hand into two, the three fingers and the two fingers. The Greater Will then decides to use only the two fingers to represent their side. This decision as to picking the two fingers is unknown, while casting the three fingers away to be taken by the flame of frenzy deep underground. This could be further proven by the fact that the three fingers consist of the thumb, index, and middle finger, while the two fingers are the pointer and the pinky finger. This theory may be very likely, but I'm the wrong person to deep dive into this. Dimensions are stacked vertically in Bloodborne. This is a simple theory that the nightmare planes are stacked on top of each other. For this theory, I'm going to link to a GameFAQs post by Phantom Blade 9. Chester is from Yharnam. Marvelous Chester is a character from Dark Souls 1, whose aesthetic looks completely foreign to Dark Souls and rather looks like he's from Bloodborne. Though this is very likely not the case, let's still speculate. Chester's long coat dropped upon death states, quote, "Black leather long coat hat, worn by Marvelous Chester, a man of mystery lost in the past. This exquisitely sewn aristocratic suit allows its wearer to move in silence, lending well to stealth." End quote. Chester himself says,
Let me guess. Snatched by a shadowy limb and dragged off to the past? Yes, of course. Exactly what happened to me. We are both strangers in this strange land, but at least now there are two of us.
He mentioned he's from a faraway land, and possibly knows of the convoluted time in the lands of Lordran. Though it's fun to speculate, this is where the evidence ends. Ash Lake Skull. In Dark Souls 1, when the player visits Ash Lake, a skull of unknown origin can be seen, and it's not entirely certain as to which creature this skull belongs to. It's been theorized that this skull may belong to a demon, as demons spread throughout Lordran, with the Titanite demon, though their anatomy is a bit different, and Quelaag's boss room is not too far away, so this isn't super unreasonable. But the more likely answer may be to some sort of dragon from ages long gone. Bloodborne New Game Plus Gravestone. In Bloodborne, if you choose the ending to submit your life to Gehrman at the end of the hunt in a New Game Plus cycle of the game, you can see a tombstone underneath a smaller tree that wasn't there before. This is possibly to signify that the dream is either repeating or continuing, as cycling worlds is a common theme in the Souls franchise. Beasthood is a trait of humanity. Beasts are clearly different beings than humans in the world of Bloodborne, and we'll discuss the citizens of Old Yharnam soon, and how they were tainted by the Healing Church. However, it is possible that somebody who willingly gives themselves to beasthood may actually be using a trait created by humans. The item Beast Blood Pellets, used as medicine, raise your beasthood meter to increase damage the more your beasthood meter rises. Its description states, quote, Large medicinal pellets supposedly formed of coagulated beast blood, banned by the Healing Church due to their unclear origin, grants a spurt of beasthood, ripping apart the flesh of one's enemies and being rained up by their splattering blood invigorates one's sense of beasthood, feeding strength and euphoric feeling alike. End quote. Not much is stated within these pellets, other than the fact that the Healing Church banned their use. Their unclear origins could be a sign that humans used the power of the beast themselves to ward off beasts during the hunt. Irreverent Izzy is an inventor of many beast tools such as the Beast Claw and Beast Roar. Even more signs that beasthood is used as a weapon by hunters, further showing that there is more humanity within beasts than it seems. Sir Alone's secret death animation. Sir Alone in the Crown of the Old Iron King DLC and Dark Souls 2 has a secret death animation where if you manage to hitlist Sir Alone's boss fight, he will commit seppuku out of respect for your abilities. This animation is further used in his weapon, Bewitched Alone's Sword, when using the weapon art. How to woo fair maidens. This refers to how in Gehrman's dream in Bloodborne, he owns a book titled How to Pick Up Fair Maidens. The doll in his dream has the likeness of Lady Maria, who he possibly had an attraction towards in the past, hence why he owns this book. It's commonly speculated that Gehrman struggled with female companionship. The Great One. This refers to Bloodborne, however I'm not sure who the Great One would be, rather Great Ones as a whole. These are extremely powerful godlike beings in the world of Bloodborne. They are extremely similar to kin who are graced with eldritch knowledge and have come into contact with Great Ones. One distinguishing feature between the two is their blood color. Great Ones bleed red, while kin bleed a yellowish fluid. An example of a Great One would be the moon presence, while an example of kin would be Rom, the vacuous spider. Rom's own intelligence caused him to go mindless, hence the meaning of vacuous. The concept of Great Ones is a massive strain on the minds of those who cannot comprehend them. The Great Ones have a big role to play in the story of Bloodborne, and are one of the main driving factors that put everything into motion, as said before, such as Gehrman's dream being due to the moon presence. Ashen Blood origin. Ashen Blood is a sickness that plagued Old Yharnam and caused it to be blocked off and sealed off from the rest of the world. Its symptoms are similar to poisoning and can be treated by the player character with an antidote, though for others it is only a short-term solution. The Powder Keg Hunters, or most famously Jura, have taken it upon themselves to protect these beasts of Old Yharnam, as they are only people plagued by disease. Where did this disease come from? In the Bloodborne comic, a character named Priest Clement discovers the Healing Church priests threw a powder into the water supply of Old Yharnam. On the item White Church Garb, its description states, quote, "These doctors are superiors to the Black Preventative Hunters and specialists in experimentally backed blood ministration and the Scourge of the Beast. They believe that medicine is not a means of treatment, but rather a method for research, and that some knowledge can only be obtained by exposing oneself to sickness." End quote. This pretty much proves the Healing Church is behind the intentional poisoning of Old Yharnam. Ornstein is an illusion in Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1, the player encounters the duo fight of Dragon Slayer Ornstein and Executioner Smo. But people speculate that Ornstein is actually an illusion and resides somewhere else. Now it's known that illusions in Dark Souls can indeed interact with the player, such as sentinels or invaders. So the fact that a boss fight can be an illusion is plausible. Ornstein's soul could have been granted to him by Gwyn, being a piece of his own soul entrusted to his closest knights. We know from earlier that Ornstein aligns himself with the Nameless King, which is nowhere to be found in Dark Souls 1, and we stumble across an Ornstein in Archdragon Peak in Dark Souls 3. It's possible that this Ornstein could be the real Ornstein. Back to Dark Souls 1, we know that Guinevere is an illusion created by Gwyndolin, but the same could always be possible for Ornstein. Anor Londo's warm light fades after Guinevere's illusion is destroyed, and we know that walking along the ground wasn't enough to fade the facade. So why would fighting an enemy not be possible if contact doesn't always ruin illusions? But this is all a theory. Soul Feeder. Starting out in Dark Souls 3, Ludwig drops the Skull Ring, quote, one of Corlin's transposed wonders, derived from the soul of a Soul Feeder, easier to be detected by enemies. The Soul Feeder was a beast that insatiably absorbed souls to feed its own power. Even after its accursed corpse was burned, it is said that the pungent stench of souls left the air permanently stained, end quote. This refers to the Soul Eater in its description, but it's not stated exactly what the Soul Eater is. However, it's stated that their corpse was burned. There's a theory on Reddit that talks about Koth possibly being the being described, but I think it's more likely it's just an unnamed primordial serpent. Gascoigne's elder daughter. In Bloodborne, there is a repeating concept of imposters such as Yosefka's voice changing. However, there is another imposter who pretends to be somebody who never existed. There was a family that consisted of 3 people as stated in the tiny music box. Quote, a small box received from a young Yharnam girl. Plays a song shared by her mother and father. Inside the lid is a small scrap of paper, perhaps an old message. 2 names can be made out, however faintly, Viola and Gascoigne, end quote. You can receive this music box from Gascoigne's daughter to seek out her mother and father, but this story does not have a happy ending.
Who are you? I don't know your voice, but I know that smell. Are you a hunter? And please will you look for my mum? Daddy never came back from the hunt, and she went to find him, but now she's gone too. I'm all alone and scared.
Note that only 3 people are present in the family, Gascoigne, Viola, and a young Yharnam girl, Kiordi Young, who states that she is all alone. Father Gascoigne's wife, Viola, was killed by him when she went to look for him. This can be found in a woman's body in Father Gascoigne's boss room. Its description states, quote, a woman's bright red brooch, engraved with the name Viola. Perhaps the jewel is a gift from a hunter, end quote. When visiting Gascoigne's house, you can talk to his daughter, or you can tell her that her parents are deceased. She will be grief-stricken, and if told of a safe space to visit, she will die along the way, eaten by a pig in the sewers where you can find the red messenger ribbon upon killing the pig. Quote, red ribbon that messengers are oddly fond of. The thick, pungent red was drawn from the organs of some unfortunate victim. A strange choice indeed, but perhaps the messengers wearing this accessory constitutes a form of mourning. End quote. Later in the game, after killing Rom, you can come back and talk to Gascoigne's elder daughter, and have the option to give her the red messenger ribbon.
You haven't by any chance seen my little sister, have you? I told her to look after the house, but she's run off somewhere. She's still quite small, and wears a big white ribbon. Have you seen her out there anywhere? How did this happen? Why would she ever go outside? At least I'll have something to remember her by.
You can come back later and pick up the white messenger ribbon at the bottom of the ladder. His daughter seems to have left the house and was killed by an ogre at the bottom. He will not aggro if going up the ladder, but will aggro if going down, supporting the fact the ogre killed her. However, this daughter is not really his daughter, as his younger daughter refers to them all by name and that she's all alone. However, this imposter, when talking, pretends to be part of the family, when she's never been stated as such before. Doppelgangers are always a scary and uncanny subject to me, so in the world of Bloodborne, I find them extremely interesting. Someone pretending to be someone else, but not quite getting it right. Lady Maria committed seppuku. It's possible the Lady Maria we see in-game in Bloodborne's Old Hunter DLC is actually a body with her soul trapped within, with no option but to fight the player. Lady Maria was once a kind woman who Gehrman modeled the doll after, who was thought to have ended her own life, riddled with guilt over the slaughter of the fishing hamlet. Lady Maria is possibly trapped in the nightmare forced to protect the astral clock tower to make up for her sins and atrocities committed in the living world. Havel is the Dragon Slayer armor. The Dragon Slayer armor is a boss in Dark Souls 3, and Havel was discussed previously. This states that these two may be one and the same. Soul of the Dragon Slayer armor states, quote, "The Dragon Slayer armor, controlled by the Pilgrim Butterfly, lost its master long ago, but still remembers their sporting hunts." End quote. I don't believe that Havel is the Dragon Slayer armor, as he can be summoned at Archdragon Peak, but rather, I'd like to bring up the possibility of the Dragon Slayer armor possibly being a follower of Havel's. It stated that it lost its master long ago, but still remembers their sporting hunts, its master possibly being Havel. Switching to talking about the Pilgrim Butterflies, they may possibly be the same as normal pilgrims, with their ultimate goal being to reach the peak of Lothric. This would explain their location, but not much is known about the butterflies themselves. So perhaps in a way to protect the peak of Lothric, they summoned the Dragon Slayer armor, a follower of Havel, the strongest warrior they can think of. This is only a thought, as it's fun to explore various narratives. Either way, the Dragon Slayer armor's origin is unknown. Malenia scrapped Tomoe boss. I don't even have to do the work for this one, as the creator themselves have explained it. Well, here's a theory that FromSoft had plans for a Lady Tomoe boss fight, either in the base game of Sekiro or in a DLC. However, it was scrapped early on, and when Elden Ring came around, they simply repurposed this fight into Malenia. Malenia has numerous Sekiro-like mechanics, including one where she can block out of your hit stun. She also has a long-distance thrust attack that looks suspiciously like something you could Makiri counter in Sekiro. The most compelling thing is her waterfowl dance attack. This attack looks almost exactly like the Spiral Cloud Passage combat art in Sekiro, and is said to be an attack technique created by Lady Tomoe herself. Inichiro also uses a less powerful version of it in his boss fight, which makes sense as Tomoe was his teacher. FromSoft also has a history of repurposing cut content in future projects. Scrap Bat Demon for DS3 was repurposed into the Demon Prince fight, and Radagon's Red Wolf uses the basis of a Scrap Wolf fight from DS3, as well as it different from the Champion's Grave Tender. Finally, there's a design similarity Malenia shares to Sekiro, particularly the katana usage and prosthetic arm, despite having a mostly Valkyrie inspiration. End quote. Pontiff Sullivan is a boss in Dark Souls 3 that takes place around the middle of the game in Anor Londo, but many fans believe that Pontiff may have been the final boss of Dark Souls 3, since he is a main factor in several things throughout the lands of Lothric. One such example is stated in the Soul of Pontiff Sullivan, quote, "Pontiff Sullivan of Irithyll imprisoned a god of the old royalty in the abandoned cathedral to be fed to the devourer." End quote. This likely refers to the feeding of Gwyndolin to Aldrich. He's also responsible for Vort of the Boreal Valley and the Dancer of the Boreal Valley. His knights who were loyal to him were given the ring, Pontiff's left eye, quote, "bewitched ring that Pontiff Sullivan bestowed upon his knights. Knights who peer into the black orb are lured into battles of death, transformed into frenzied beasts. No wonder the Pontiff only provides these rings to those dispatched to the foreign lands." End quote. This ring transformed his followers into beasts, explaining the appearance of Boreal Outrider Knights, Vort, and the Dancer. Pontiff's roots are placed deep all over Lothric, and his importance was thought to be that of the final boss of Dark Souls 3. However, today we all know this is not the case. I will link a Reddit post in the description that goes into more evidence into content rather than lore reasons. Vagrants. Vagrants are a strange Bloodborne-esque enemy that spawns in Dark Souls 1. I myself have never seen this enemy. However, the wiki states that they are enemies that spawn in response to bloodstains being lost or items dropped. There are several places that these enemies could spawn at all over the lands of Lordran. It's also stated that these vagrants come in two versions, a good and evil version. The good one flees upon being discovered, and the evil vagrant is hostile. Shira, daughter of the Duke. Shira, a knight of Filianor in the Ring City in Dark Souls 3, refers to herself as the daughter of the Duke. The other occurrence of the word Duke would be the Duke's archives in Dark Souls 1, Seath's personal library. But what are Shira's ties to Seath? My guess is that she may either be a possible dragon crossbreed, or simply having lost her mind post-time-lapse. When first meeting Shira, she wants the player character to save her ally Dark Eater Madir and put him out of his misery.
I am known as Shira, servant to the Princess Filianor, matriarch of the Church. They who are ken to God's name are surely ken to the terrors of the dark. Please, I bid thee take not from the princess her peace or rest, as the fire waneth does she lie by the dark. I beg of thee, put the great dragon to rest, afore the dark consumeth him and his vows are forgot.
Before your interaction with Filianor, she is an ally to the player character. However, afterwards, she seems to have lost her mind or become enraged by the player's actions, not seeming to remember what we have done for her.
I've searched for thee, dark-stricken creature. I am Shira, daughter of the Duke, descendant of gods, and trusted friend to Madir.
Seath was very known to kidnap women for his personal experiments, so it is very possible that she may be in some capacity related to Seath, though very likely distant. Artorias and Kyrian are lovers. Lord's Blade Kyrian appears after the death of Artorias the Abysswalker in Dark Souls 1. She wants Artorias' soul, possibly because she was a fellow companion to him, and simply because he and her were both part of Gwyn's 4 loyal knights. However, it's hinted she had an interest in Artorias, though never proven. Upon death, she will say the line,
"You humans, my dear Artorias."
However, she also states "my dear friend" in another voice line.
You, is that not the soul of the man who fell on this spot? He was a dear friend. I wish to pay proper respect with that soul.
I'd like to believe she actually does have an interest in him, but we may never know for sure. Elden Beast is an alien. The Elden Beast, as the final boss of Elden Ring, presents the message God slain after being killed, and is the only boss to do so. Upon death, the player obtains the Elden Remembrance. The description states, quote, "It was the vassal beast of the greater will, and living incarnation of the concept of order." End quote. The definition of an alien is belonging to a foreign country or nation. I'm not talking about that kind of usage of the word, but the greater will sent its one and only vassal beast, the Elden Beast, down to the lands between, with its envoys, the Two Fingers. So based on the wording of this statement, I would say that this is almost certainly true. Giant Dad. Giant Dad is a build in the early stages of Dark Souls 1. Popular creator, oh boy, Ymfah, there you go, made a video teaching the player how to create this build. The description from his video is as follows, quote, "Giant Dad consists of 6 parts, a Chaos Zweihander +5, aka the Bass Cannon, the Mask of the Father, Giant Set, Grass Crush Shield, Rings, Havel's Ring, Favor and Protection, Pyromancy, 2 Black Flames," end quote. Even though this build is a joke and was ran a long time ago, by I presume a multitude of players, with the state of poise in Dark Souls 1, this build is still surprisingly viable in the game, even today. Bloodborne Cart. This is a meme entry of the game named Nightmare Cart, formerly referred to as Bloodborne Cart. As of writing this entry, March 3rd, 2024, IGN announced this game officially has a release date. I'll link to the article that talks about the game, as it'll be released very soon on Steam. This reminds me of the popular fan game, Bloodborne PSX, made by the same creator, LW Media. Bloodborne PSX is essentially Bloodborne itself, but made in a PS1-like aesthetic. Both of these games seem immensely cool, and although I say they're memes, you should probably check both of these out, as I most likely will. Ludwig guided by aliens. Ludwig the Holy Blade story is a very sad one indeed. As a hunter of old times, he is very used to the hunt, and how violent and gruesome it is, and how long the nights can be. But how did Ludwig end up how he is, and how is he guided by aliens? A guidance Carol rune dropped upon death states, quote, "A Carol rune discovered by the old hunter Ludwig, along with the holy moonlight sword. When Ludwig closed his eyes, he saw darkness, or perhaps nothingness, and that is where he discovered the tiny beings of light. Ludwig was certain that these playful dancing sprites offered guidance. They could empty Ludwig of his fears, at least in the midst of a hunt." End quote. The description states that these tiny beings of light got Ludwig through the horror of the hunt, but this may be well how he lost his way through time. The Holy Moonlight Sword's description states, quote, "An arcane sword discovered long ago by Ludwig. When blue moonlight dances around the sword, and it channels the abyssal cosmos, its great blade will hurl a shadowy light wave. The Holy Moonlight Sword is synonymous with Ludwig, the Holy Blade, but few have ever set eyes on the great blade, and whatever guidance it has to offer, it seems to be of a very private, elusive sort." End quote. Ludwig's guiding moonlight is the only reason he is able to remember who he really is. It's likely that Ludwig was not guided by aliens, but immersed in the beautiful moonlight of the sword to which he found. Without it, he had no reason to continue the hunt, so his only choice was to continue on. But he had the same fate as every other. He became what he once hunted. Hoth and Frampt mirror the serpent rings. Both the covetous silver serpent ring and the covetous gold serpent ring share the same description in Dark Souls 1. Quote, "The serpent is an imperfect dragon and symbol of the undead. Its habit of devouring prey, even larger than itself, has led to an association of gluttony." End quote. The rings state that the serpent is an imperfect dragon, while Hoth and Frampt are stated to be primordial serpents. Though these are not exactly different beings, they're also not the same beings, so the change these rings are modeled after their likeness are not zero. In Dark Souls 3, the description is as so. Quote, "A gold ring depicting a snake that could have been, but never was. A dragon. Fallen foes are more likely to drop items. Snakes are known as creatures of great avarice, devouring prey even larger than themselves by swallowing them whole." End quote. These are nearly the same description, however the word serpent is changed to snake. Primordial serpents are imperfect dragons, so it's possible that maybe snake is a placeholder word for primordial serpents, as Frampt and Hoth are almost never mentioned in Dark Souls 3. I believe this theory is possibly very true. Primordial serpents in Dark Souls 3 beta. I'm not entirely sure what this entry is referring to. However, primordial serpents do make an appearance in Dark Souls 3 in the form of statues in the Grain Archives. These primordial serpents are much more angelic looking than Frampt and Hoth, so it's likely that these are separate serpents entirely. These statues also make another appearance in the Ring City, however their lore is very unknown as of now. Blood magic burns. In Elden Ring, there are multiple incantations consisting of blood flames, blood flame talons, and blood flame blade. This is a very straightforward statement that blood flame magic burns, which the name of these spells pretty much confirms. The blood flame blade incantation coats your blade in a split fire and blood damage. Blood flame talons even explode after around a second. And lastly, the blood within the spells looks like fire. So yeah, blood magic burns. Age of the Deep Sea. The Age of the Deep Sea is stated within the item description of the Soul of Aldrich. Quote, "When Aldrich ruminated on the fading of the fire and inspired visions of a coming age of the deep sea, he knew the path would be arduous, but he had no fear. He would devour the gods himself." End quote. Some speculate that this may be a reference to Bloodborne with its connection with water. Bloodborne has the entirety of the fishing hamlet story, and Mergo in Latin translates to submerged. This may be a satisfactory explanation. However, I believe by the deep sea, Aldrich simply means another way to say Age of the Dark. In the item description Deep Gem, it states, quote, "A gem infused of titanite, found in the dregs of the Cathedral of the Deep, used in infusion to deep weapons. Deep weapons inflict dark damage, but lose scaling effects. There is darkness that lies beyond human ken. End quote. This is just further evidence that the dark may just be a synonym for the deep. Deep sea may just equal darkness. Odin, Moon Presence Power Struggle. The Moon Presence, as mentioned before, is responsible for trapping Gehrman in the Hunter's dream. But what was the reason for this? A note found in the upper floor of the lecture hall reads, quote, "Hunt the Great Ones, hunt the Great Ones." End quote. This note was possibly left by the Moon Presence, with the motive being as such, becoming a Great One, rise to an even higher being. But what is the power struggle with Odin, and what is Odin? Gael rune, formless Odin, reads, "A secret symbol left by Carol, runesmith of Bergenworth. The Great One Odin, lacking form, exists only in voice, and is symbolized by this rune. Those who memorize it enjoy a larger supply of quicksilver bullets. Human or no, using blood is a medium of the highest grade. In the essence of the formless Great One, Odin, both Odin and his inadvertent worshippers, surreptitiously seek the precious blood." End quote. Odin lacks a form, which may indicate that he was able to rise to a plane of existence, even beyond that of the Moon Presence, as he may be referred to as a formless voice. Now back to what the Moon Presence desires. It's unknown whether it simply wants to kill other Great Ones, or something else entirely. It may not have a conflict with Odin in particular, but possibly because it is just another Great One in its way. Gael is the furtive pygmy. This is an interesting theory contradicting our previous theory of Manus being the furtive pygmy. The theory is that Slave Knight Gael may be the furtive pygmy from Dark Souls 1. Gael is one of the oldest beings in all of Dark Souls. Being a slave knight, he was used by lords of old to be sent in as cannon fodder, knowing what fate lay upon them. Being undead, they would always come back, making this a strong war tactic. However, being undead, this means he eventually outlived his owners, if you can even call this outliving. With no purpose and having the taste of freedom, he had to find his own new purpose. This is when he stumbles upon the Painted World, and his new purpose to create a brand new world. This is a fun theory, however I believe the wording of several items disproves this theory. The item Blood of the Dark Soul states, quote, "Blood of the Dark Soul that seeped from the hole within Slave Knight Gael, used as pigment by his lady in Ariandel to depict the Painted World. When Gael came upon the Pygmy Lords, he discovered that their blood had long ago dried, and so consumed the Dark Soul." End quote. This states that Gael came upon the Pygmy Lords and rather was not amongst them when he was banished to the Ring City by Gwyn, shortly after the war against the dragons. If he was the furtive pygmy, he should have been forgotten about, and not stumbled across these Pygmy Lords. The fact that he knows the Painter Lady from the world of Arianda shows he has ventured outside of the Ring City, which the furtive pygmy should not have been able to do, as by this time the furtive pygmy is all but forgotten about. The soul of Slave Knight Gael states, quote, "The red-hooded, wandering Slave Knight Gael sought the blood of the Dark Soul as pigment for the Painted World, but Gael knew he was no champion, that the Dark Soul would likely ruin him, and that he had little hopes of a safe return." End quote. This is but further proof of his wandering outside of the Ring City, an interesting theory, but likely to be untrue. Gods in Elden Ring are great ones. This is a theory that tries to link Elden Ring and Bloodborne together, and there is some evidence to prove this theory. However, I do not believe the games are connected, but I'm going to try to look at this through the lens that they are. There are several outer gods in Elden Ring, with a few examples being the Formless Mother, the Greater Will, note never confirmed to be an outer god, but we'll roll with it, and the Sealed God of Scarlet Rot, being some of the most known. As for Bloodborne, some examples are as already stated, Odin, Moon Presence, and the Orphan of Kos. These gods are very similar in description, especially the Formless Mother and Odin, as Odin is referred to as Formless Odin. From what I've seen, nothing outright confirms that outer gods are or are not Great Ones, but I have seen the statement that each Great One is autonomous, while some outer gods are cosmic principles, such as the primeval current, not confirmed to be an outer god. There sadly seems to be no concrete proof outright confirming this theory. Significance of 3 in Elden Ring. Many things in Elden Ring come in sets of 3s, such as the 3 fingers, the incantation triple rings of light, Renala, queen of the full moon, had 3 children, and Marika's 3 children, Godwyn and the Omen twins. Although the number 3 has significance in the world, the same can likely be said for any other number, such as 2 with the 2 fingers. Perhaps I've missed something, so if anybody has any more ideas, let me know. Solaire's the Karthus Sandworm. Everybody must have heard this before. Solaire, the Warrior of Sunlight from Dark Souls 1, must be the Karthus Sandworm from Dark Souls 3. Presumably, if Solaire was to die to the Sunlight Maggots in the Lost Izalith in Dark Souls 1. The evidence is very shaky at best, such as the worm drops an undead bone shard, and the miracle lightning stake. More evidence is that Smoldering Lake is likely to be the location of the long-lost Izalith. The item Yellow Bug Pellet states, quote, "The Grave Wardens of Karthus used these to repel a great sandworm. The worm tumbled to the catacombs and proceeded to dominate its new home in the Smoldering Lake." End quote. Its new home states it hasn't always lived in the Smoldering Lake region, and instead came from faraway lands, likely Karthus of the Sands, a faraway land from Lothric. The Karthus sandworm is likely to not be Solaire. However, the lands of Karthus are very intriguing indeed. For fun, switching subjects, the Karthus Blood Ring states, quote, "Ring worn by warriors of the Sand Kingdom, Karthus, boosts rolling invincibility at the cost of defense. The sword technique of Karthus allows for fluid movement with a curved sword. Masters of the technique are said to dazzle their opponents by moving as weightlessly as a grain of sand. They live for their High Lord Wolnir, conqueror of most kingdoms known to their people." End quote. This is yet more evidence the sandworm from Dune came from a faraway land. Gaping Dragon in Blighttown. The Gaping Dragon in Dark Souls was one of the few remaining distant dragons left after their slaughter. It resided in Blighttown until it eventually became corrupted by darkness, only to then climb up to the depths, meeting its end by the player character. The Gaping Dragon at one point swallowed the Blighttown key, quote, "Key to Blighttown, in the depths of the undead berg, swallowed by the Gaping Dragon. As its name suggests, Blighttown is a place of great pestilence. Even the polluted inhabitants of the depths are aware of its danger, and built this mighty door in hopes that they could remain safely separated." End quote. So yes, it is very clear that the Gaping Dragon came from Blighttown. Its cutscene alone should prove it, showing it climbing up from the depths deep below. Filianor and Manus betrothed. This most likely refers to the fact that Manus and Filianor may be engaged. A Tumblr post states, quote, "Manus was to be wed to Filianor, but the wedding was a ruse by the gods meant to seal away as much of the Dark Soul as possible. Both were placed in a deep slumber to keep the abyss at bay, and then sent as far away from each other as possible, with Manus being sealed away right beneath the center of the god's power, Anor Londo, while Filianor was gifted to the pygmies at World's End. Despite this, the two truly did love each other. Manus' pendant was a wedding gift he received, which is why he flies into such a rage when it's taken away from him. He kidnaps Princess Dusk to serve as a surrogate for Filianor, as he's lost the ability to distinguish between the two after being consumed by the abyss." End quote. This would explain as to why Manus kidnapped the Princess of Ulasil and his rage at the loss of his pendant. This would even explain the point of the pendant. However, its description contradicts the statement. Quote, "One of the ancient treasures of Anor Londo, presented to Artorias for facing the abyss, effectively deflects the dark of the abyss, especially in its magic forms." End quote. Perhaps there is some truth to this theory, but maybe not every part is true. Eastern lands in every game. The Eastern lands are mentioned in each Souls game, specifically in Dark Souls, the Shiva of the East. However, it's mentioned in each game but there isn't much detail as to what these lands consist of. The Eastern set states, quote, distinctive armor made in an Eastern land, exquisitely crafted. This armor offers excellent defense, particularly against slash attacks, which are one of the main threats in battles in the East, end quote. This description is very similar to that of the armor in Dark Souls 3. However, in Dark Souls 2, Alone's set states, quote, Sir Alone came to this land from the East, chose to serve a little known and unestablished lord, and helped him become the Old Iron King, end quote. Here we get a distant figure from the Eastern lands, but no closer to any more information on it. As for other games, starting with Elden Ring, this land could possibly be the land of reeds, as the warriors wear similar armor to samurai and wield katanas. Bloodborne has a character named Yamamura the Wanderer, and his garb's Kaki Haori, quote, garb of a distant eastern land, worn by Yamamura the Wanderer. This eastern warrior pursued a beast for honorable revenge. Then it became a hunter of the League, but when he stared straight into impurity, it drove him mad, end quote. And lastly, Sekiro is the biggest stretch, but it is possible that the lands in Sekiro are what is being referred to as the Eastern lands. My belief is that none of these have anything to do with one another, but East is just a simple direction to pick, and makes an easy story to a distant land, unique to each game. Patches writes the item descriptions. This is a theory that the reoccurring character Patches wrote the item descriptions in each of the games. In Dark Souls 3, the description for the black leather armor states, quote, he, wearer of this fine attire, was admired by friends and enemies alike, for his skills were unmatched and his heart was true as gold. As its new owner, you have quite the shoes to fill, end quote. This is an unlikely theory, but it's almost certain that Patches wrote his own descriptions and is aware of the fact that items have descriptions, and as such, he can't be trusted. Andre is the smithing god. Andre was once to play a key role in the story of Dark Souls 1, originally wanted to be one of Gwyn's offspring. This very fact alone would be enough to make Andre a god of sorts. However, this idea was scrapped early on, and makes no reference in game. Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 are an illusion. This is a theory I sure do hope isn't real, as I'm sure that each and every one of us really love the idea of everything being just a dream. I've not found much evidence for this idea. However, as the player character, we can notice how each world sometimes doesn't have the best transition into one another. However, this idea just doesn't interest me very much, so I'll be moving on. Londor is Anor Londo. Now this is going to get confusing, but I'm going to assume that this subject meant that Londor is New Londo instead. I have never seen anything outright confirming that these two locations are one and the same, but they do share similarities. Londor is the land of the undead, and many undead are outside of the New Londo ruins. However, a contradiction to this would be that New Londo was given to the humans by Gwyn, who passed away in the flooding of the ruins. To switch topics, perhaps Gwyn tried to make this New Londo similar to Anor Londo, but made for the Four Kings and their people, possibly making this entry New Londo is Anor Londo. If Lordran and New Londo happen to be one and the same, then New Londo could be compared to Anor Londo. I realize this section was super confusing with not much evidence, but I promise writing this I'm confused as you are. Black Knight Ghosts. The Black Knights we see in Dark Souls 1 and subsequently Dark Souls 3 are likely to be ghosts of their former selves, trapped to ever wander when Gwyn linked the First Flame, still loyal to him even after the war with the demons. The Black Knight set states, quote, armor of the Black Knights who haunt Lordran. The knights followed Lord Gwyn when he departed to link the fire, but they were burned to ashes in the newly kindled flame, wandering the world as disembodied spirits ever after, end quote. There's not really much more to add to this subject other than the fact that this is most likely true. Primordial serpents want to feast on humanity. primordial serpents themselves are very mysterious characters, but is it possible that they had ulterior motives and actually feasted on humans? Kingseeker Frampt will trade with the player at Firelink Shrine similarly to Snuggly the Crow. However, these two characters have one major difference in their trades. Snuggly will trade strictly items for items, and will never return back anything to do with humanity nor souls, but Kingseeker Frampt will trade the player character's souls for various items. In order to collect souls, you must either kill or crush souls of various names, such as the Nameless Soldier or Grey Hero. Could this be proof that not only Frampt feasts on the souls of undead or humans, but every primordial serpent throughout history? Koth and Lothric's bedchamber. I found no evidence linking Koth to Lothric's bedchamber. However, despite this, Koth may very well be intertwined with Prince Lothric in Dark Souls 3 in various ways. Koth may likely be the influence on Lothric to station at the top of Lothric Castle and stop anyone from further lighting the flame. Both Koth and Lothric had the same wants, as they both desire to let the flame fade. Soul of the Twin Princes states, quote, "The two princes rejected their duty to become lords of Cinder, and settled down far, far away to watch the fire fade from a distance. Curse makes their souls nearly inseparable." End quote. Not only this, but as mentioned before, primordial serpent statues are in no other place than the path to the Grand Archives, and the archives themselves, which may be further proof that Lothric knew of Koth. The sorcery Soul Stream states, quote, "Sorcery imparted by the first of the scholars, when Lothric and the Grand Archives were but young. The first of the scholars doubted linking of the fire, and was alleged to be a private mentor to the royal prince. Koth may very well have been this private mentor to specifically the royal prince, as Lorien is only Lothric's sword." Pendant Gift. The Pendant Gift refers to the item pendant, quote, "A simple pendant with no effect. Even so, pleasant memories are crucial to survival on arduous journeys." End quote. Despite the fact that this says it has no effect, it can indeed be traded to Snuggly the Crow at the Undead Asylum for a secret unnamed key, which is used in the Duke's archives after Big Hat Logan's questline has been completed. A door will appear behind the chest from which Logan's catalyst is looted from. Inside this door, you'll find a link to a Reddit post, which reveals this pendant gift seems to be a joke among the community with no real use. World Trees. World Trees are an important feature in several FromSoft titles, the biggest one being Elden Ring with the Erd Tree. However, what about other titles? In Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, this World Tree could be referring to the Fountainhead Palace's Sakura Tree. In Bloodborne, seen from the Hunter's Dream, in the distance are Arch Trees. And lastly, the entirety of Dark Souls could have at one point been one big world tree. I'll put a diagram on screen and let you guys pause and decipher this. I think it's also important to note that in Dark Souls 1, when traversing from Blighttown to Ash Lake, the player seems to travel through the roots of a tree, showing that trees have a great presence in each game. PS3 DLC weapon prediction. This is the first one I am completely stumped on, as I'm not sure as to what this is referring to. My guess is that somebody in the community before the Ring City DLC came out had some crazy wrong prediction. Let me know if somebody knows what this is. Shura is a form of beasthood. Shura is one of the endings in Sekiro, and for this theory, the mindset of Shura is being compared to that of the Bloodborne beasthood. In Sekiro, the outfit named Another's Memory, Shura, Memory of Shura, told via Ashina folk song. Fields of bodies, mountains of dead, down Dragon Spring River our country bled, fiery god, demon wolf in red. End quote. A person afflicted by Shura is turned into a demon, or a savage, similar to that of beasthood. The beast blood pellet states, quote, "Ripping apart the flesh of one's enemies and being rained up by their splattering blood invigorates one's sense of beasthood, feeding strength and euphoric feeling alike." End quote. This euphoric feeling may be referring to what somebody afflicted by Shura may be experiencing, euphoria. However, physically, Shura does not turn you into an actual beast, it only affects you mentally. Though fun to speculate, this is most likely not true. Nameless King is the Stormlord. The Stormlord is a character faintly mentioned in the lore of Elden Ring, and this theory believes that the Nameless King fits that role. The Stormhawk Dean Ashes mention, quote, "Spirit of a fierce hawk that faithfully rendered lifelong service to the old King of Stormvale long ago. When the true storm raged, its cries emboldened its fellows in battle, and the tempestuous winds that encircle it shred through foes." End quote. The Nameless King would make good sense as a fit for this role, as he rides his faithful Stormdrake. The Storm Curved Sword from Dark Souls 3 states, quote, "Curved sword imbued with the strength of the Stormdrake, the Nameless King, ally of ancient dragons, fought beside the Stormdrake in countless battles. When the great beast fell, the king claimed his soul, as was the custom in the age of the gods. Skill Tornado. Imbue blade with the wrath of storm in a spinning motion, and follow with a strong attack to bear that wrath upon foes." End quote. The Nameless King, through this weapon, was shown to have powers of the storm, very similar to Ash's Award in Elden Ring, such as Storm Assault and Storm Blade. If all FromSoft games are proven to be linked, this theory would have some merit. Miyazaki likes feet. I don't believe Miyazaki has an actual thing for feet, but rather design choices. For Malenia, Miyazaki became self-conscious of Western fans making fun of him, so much so that he changed Malenia's barefoot design to that of prosthetic, so he doesn't get made fun of. Other examples of barefoot women in Souls franchise are Sister Fried, Crossbreed Priscilla, Renala, and Ronnie, kind of, and there's gotta be a million more. My girlfriend is gonna watch this, and she's not gonna be very happy. Fire Giants worship Gwyn. The Fire Giants in Elden Ring are mentioned to have worshipped a fell god until there was only one giant left. The Remembrance of the Fire Giant states, quote, "Fire Giant is a survivor of the war against the giants. Upon realizing the flames of their forge would never die, Queen Marika marked him with a curse. O trifling giant, mayest thou tend thy flame for eternity." End quote. This item talks about the war Marika invoked against the giants' race until there was only one. But this statement mentions that fire giants worship Gwyn. The one-eyed shield states, quote, "Tricksome shield made from white stone depicting a malformed one-eyed god. A barrel of a firearm pokes through the open mouth. Once worshipped by the giants, this evil deity is believed to have been slain by Queen Marika." End quote. If the fell god is indeed Gwyn, he would have been slain long ago, which we know is not true as the player character is the one to end Gwyn's suffering. It's also pretty clear that he doesn't have one eye. An interesting link nonetheless. Velka. Velka, the Goddess of Sin, is a character seldomly mentioned in the world of Dark Souls. In Dark Souls 3, we can look at Velka's rapier, quote, "a symbolic, powerful thrusting sword used by the pardoner serving Velka, Goddess of Sin. It is no mere symbol, to be sure. Pardoner is an inhuman swordsman and wields this enchanted blade with a special sword technique." End quote. This shows that the rapier in question is not actually Velka's weapon, but instead used by her pardoners. Velka has power and has proven herself as a significant figure. Significant enough to even have statues built of her. The grave key item states, quote, "The grave, which no longer receives visitors, was once the site of a statue of Velka, Goddess of Sin, and was believed to pardon wrongdoing and life curses." End quote. Though important, she is long but forgotten about. Her statue is used by the player to pardon themselves of wrongdoing. However, Velka's presence spreads further than that of just Anor Londo, the city of gods. She aligns herself with the Blade of the Darkmoon Covenant, and even has her roots spread into the Painted World. This is a very simple explanation of Velka, so I'll link the wiki page in the description to read more. Ranni's ending leads to Bloodborne. This is a theory I've heard once before, but I'll let the author explain this one quote. Elden Ring mentions that Greater Will is not the only god in existence. There are other outer gods who could potentially grab power. Through Marika, Elden Beast, and the Golden Order, Greater Will managed to keep these forces at bay. For example, the god Arat. It's implied that they're all from space, much like Elden Beast, hence why there are astrologers looking to the stars. When Ranni becomes Elden Lord, she travels with her consort to begin a brand new society on the moon. This would leave a power vacuum in the lands between, with no chief deity left. The outer gods have their chance to take control. If the outer gods, and all the gods from Elden Ring, are great ones, then this would tie nicely into the various power struggles between them seen in Bloodborne. Something else worth noting is that the astrologers could survive, as they weren't part of the Golden Order, and that curiosity of looking to the stars carries over to the scholars of Byrgenwerth. Ludwig is also guided by tiny beings he discovers upon finding the Moonlight Greatsword. Tiny beings associated with the power of the moon. The descendants of Ranni's Moon Society, perhaps. End quote. The painter paints a portal to Yharnam. The painter girl, or the painting woman, from Dark Souls 3, uses Gael's Blood of the Dark Soul to paint a new world after the end of Leyndell. What if she was painting a portal too, or painting the world of Yharnam? Well, to contradict this statement, Painting Woman says this.
My thanks, Ashen One. I will finish the painting of a cold, dark, and very gentle place, so that it might make a home for someone someday. My thanks, Ashen One. I can almost see the flame. Soon, Uncle Gael will bring me the pigment. I wonder if he has found it. The dark soul of man.
Gentle is not quite the word I'd use to describe the land of Yharnam, nor the beast hunt on any level. It is unlikely that she is painting the world of Bloodborne, but rather repainting the world of the painted world, continuing the cycle once again, having history repeat itself. Koth and Frampt share a body. This refers to the theory that Koth and Frampt share the same body. Many people would compare it to something like yin and yang, as one side searches for light and the other side searches for dark. And for our Resident Evil fans, we have Ouroboros. We never see the ends of neither Koth or Frampt, leading us to believe they are playing tug-of-war with one another to lead the player to their own goals. I would like to believe this theory. However, in the Dark Lord ending in Dark Souls 1, we see multiple primordial serpents, but we never see the ends of their bodies. This could possibly mean that every primordial serpent is two-headed of sorts, with their own ambitions. Sadly, this theory ends here, as the statues in Dark Souls 3 show the ends of primordial serpents. This theory can still be faintly alive if we assume that Koth and Frampt are special cases, as well as all primordial serpents may not be created equal. Hopefully that's it on these two. I must have talked about them at least 5 other times. Patches is a great one. Patches specifically is thought to be a great one, but the chances of this are incredibly low. On multiple occasions, Patches refers to Amygdala, an actual great one. In one dialogue occasion, he refers to Amygdala as his god.
Now, say in my heart, you were as a lamb to my god. Well, you weren't to know, and it wasn't for you to know. All's well that ends well, I say. Oh, Amygdala, oh, Amygdala, have mercy on the poor bastard.
Upon death, Patches will drop a Great One's wisdom, which visually has blue slugs exiting the top of his skull. These are celestial beings known as kin, exposed to vast knowledge. Patches is most likely not a Great One, nor is he even kin either, but still on a plane of existence of human comprehension. Demon Souls leads to the Age of Ancients. I know little to nothing about the lore nor gameplay of Demon Souls, I'm gonna link to a Reddit post by Gimchi, link in description. Chalice Dungeon Unseen Enemies. The Chalice Dungeons of Bloodborne are one of the most mysterious things in any FromSoft game. Chalice Dungeons are generated by random seeds, making them one of the most expansive features in any game they've ever made. The dungeons feature special bosses and enemies not seen in the main game of Bloodborne, and is an entirely different experience to the base game. I'd highly advise checking them out, as to me, they're extremely interesting. Special bosses can be found such as the Watchdogs, Giants, Sumerian Descendants, and Yharnam, Sumerian Queen. But the Chalice Dungeons also feature unique enemies as well. I'll link to a Reddit post of a user documenting these enemies, as I doubt that even all of them have been discovered yet. There must be at least one seed not yet found. All the Souls games are connected. This is an amazing entry to finish off the video with. The theory that all games are connected. The most interesting theory to me is that everything began with the world of Elden Ring, and Elden Ring's various endings lead to different worlds. The Age of Stars ending leads to the world of Bloodborne, as Ranni removes the Greater Will's influence over the lands between, and ushers in the influence of the Moon, or Great Ones in this case. The Age of Order, I believe, leads to Sekiro, as the Age of Order envisions stability, where there is no more conflict. The Blessing of Despair leads to Dark Souls, as the souls of the dead become unable to return to the Erd Tree, just like the undead cursed by the Dark Sign. And lastly, one of the other endings would lead to Demon Souls, likely the Age of Duskborn with the rise of demons. There are probably plenty other better videos out there to describe this theory in a much better way, but this is probably the best theory to end on. If you've made it this far, I'd like to say thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hopefully you'll like and subscribe. I'll let it be known I probably won't always do icebergs, but they are a fun subject to focus on for some videos. I'll mostly make long-form content, so hopefully you'll stick around and let me know what other videos you'd like to see. I can almost do anything relating to Souls if that's liked a lot. There's plenty other topics I haven't seen covered. So thanks for watching, and have a good day.